Bom dia a todos. Esse vídeo é mais um da série de apresentações do NUGEP-NAC, que tem o propósito de fomentar a discussão relacionada ao novo sistema de precedentes do Código de Processo Civil brasileiro. Hoje nós vamos fazer um vídeo muito especial, ultrapassando inclusive as fronteiras do nosso estado e do nosso país, já que teremos aqui a acadêmica Jessi B Bolton, aluna formada em Relações Internacionais, com ênfase em Ciências Políticas na Universidade de Pepperdine. A Jessi B é uma Pepperdine Global Fellow e recentemente foi aceita no Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution na Caruso School of Law em Pepperdine. Dentro desses programas, ela está fazendo cursos de negociação, mediação, comunicação intercultural e liderança global, além de estagiar em Washington, D.C., neste último período. Ela adquiriu experiências representando a equipe de debate de Pepperdine e o clube modelo das Nações Unidas em competições e conferências internacionais. Ano passado, ela estudou Línguas, Cultura e Governo em Heidelberg, na Alemanha, juntamente com outros 9 estudantes americanos e 10 estudantes alemães. Ela foi selecionada para participar da Pepperdine Listening Summit, para discutir o combate às mudanças climáticas nos Estados Unidos e na União Europeia. Após a formatura, ela pretende seguir a formação em Direito ou fazer um mestrado em Relações Internacionais em uma instituição renomada no Reino Unido ou na costa leste dos Estados Unidos. Nós iniciaremos as perguntas em inglês com tradução por meio de legendas que serão disponibilizadas durante a entrevista com Jessi B. Então, a primeira pergunta para a Jessi é a seguinte. Hi, Jessi.
Hi.
Yes, Jessi, the first question I will ask you for this video is the following. Jessi, in 2018, we had here in the School of the Judiciary of Maranhão a whole week of debates on the aspects of common law and civil law, the two great legal systems of the Western world. At that time, we are attended by, among others, Justice Jeff Boyd, magistrate of the Texas Supreme Court, and the respected Professor Maureen Weston of the prestigious North-American University of Pepperdine, where you have a degree in international relations, right? As can be seen, the activity of judicial institutions and the centralism experienced by them throughout the world has provoked an intensification of international relations and judicial dialogue between judges. In your opinion, Jessi B, can this judicial dialogue on an international level, on an international scale, can be translated into strengthening the values of the democratic state of law and improving the judiciary itself? In what way?
First of all, thank you so much, Judge Barros, for having me. I'm honored to be here. And this is a really interesting question. I think the idea of international dialogue is one that is very important, not just here in Brazil, but also in the US and across the world. And I think that promoting dialogue can help in many areas, especially in the judicial sense as well. And I think that promoting this sense of dialogue, we kind of see two main things that come out of global dialogue. And the first is that global dialogue creates a space. It creates an area for people to have a conversation like we are doing now. It creates an opening for people who might not talk normally to speak and to share their opinions and share their worldviews. So it creates a space for individuals to connect, which in turn creates relationships and long-lasting relationships that might not just be between a person and another person, but between nation states, people groups, and really that idea of a global dialogue. And we see that not just judicially, but we also see that economically with trade between countries. And we see that between political extremes. And especially in a time like this with the pandemic, we see a kind of growing sense of being isolated and being quarantined from our family and friends. So we don't get to share that perspective. We don't get to share those worldviews that are so important whenever we promote this sense of dialogue. And I think that this connects us also internationally. Like we were talking about, I think that without global dialogue, without promoting an exchange of ideas, how can we connect with different countries? For example, thinking about developed versus developing countries. They both have equally important worldviews to bring to the table, but without this global dialogue, how can we share those ideas and how can we grow not just within our individual countries, but also within the whole world?
Within the world of civil law have long manifested strong influences derived from the models of common law, in particular the American model, for a series of historical, political, and cultural reasons, such as the system of precedents incorporated in our legal system by the Civil Procedure Code. Jessie B, do you identify in this phenomenon a tendency, a trend to uniformity of legal culture, a legal consequence of globalization? Civil law and common law are really approaching, as Italian professor Michele Tarufo often highlights?
Yes, I believe there are several influences, both historically, culturally, and politically, that play a huge role in globalization and in how we view our legal system today. And I think that these factors can be seen throughout time. I think that this idea of precedents is really interesting. Last year, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Heidelberg, Germany for the full year to study language and culture and the Germans' government system. And it was very interesting because at one point I went to a museum that was based on torture. And it was talking all about the legal system of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. And it was very interesting because one of them they were talking about witches and witch hunts and how they determined if a woman was a witch or not. And in this instance, a woman who was thought to be a witch would be taken by the mob or the crowd out to a lake, and she would be lowered into the lake in a cage. And if she drowned, then she was not a witch. But if she survived, then she was a witch and she was burned at the stake. So in short, she couldn't survive either way. There's no good alternative. You either drown because you're not a witch, or you survive to be burned because you are a witch. There wasn't a good alternative, but that was their form of law. And that is what they used to measure justice and to measure fairness and to measure, I guess, bad people, like someone who was called a witch. So I think that seeing that and realizing how far Germany has come from that and how far we all have, almost all legal systems around the world have come from that point, seeing the cultural and historical influences that still play a role are important. When I look at my home country, when I look at the US, and I see culturally a strong influence of a desire for freedom. When Great Britain controlled the 13 original colonies, they came in as the redcoats and they came into people's houses, and people didn't like that. And because of that, we still have that strong desire, a strong desire for freedom. So we see a historical precedence of negative influences, but that have shaped a positive influence today in our community and in our country as a whole. And I think that in a similar way, we can see that across the world. We can see that in South Africa with apartheid. When Nelson Mandela abolished apartheid, South Africa started to move forward and to change the way that their legal system and their judicial system worked. And then we see that still, even religion can play a role. in Iran, we see that Iran's full title is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Islam plays a huge factor in how they have shaped their judicial system. And I think we can see that across the board, from Germany to the States, all across the world, including Brazil. And I think that it is powerful and it is awesome to hear about the dialogue that has been happening with Justice Bolton and others like him, including other American citizens like Professor Weston and Jeff Boyd that have come and started this idea of how we can grow from and use the historical precedences that have been set, whether positive like the US or negative like the witch hunt, and see exactly how we can use those to shape, maybe not today, maybe we can't change today, but we can look towards tomorrow and change future generations to come.
Okay. Jessie B, maybe the biggest fight we have here in Brazil in our judiciary system is a fight against the growing litigation culture we have here. We have a lot of litigation, and since in universities we don't have this culture of teaching students to try to solve problems before they get into a court of justice. So also we have a rate of settlements in Brazil very low. They don't go through, I would say, 40, maybe 30 or 40%. I remember that in the United States, the rate of settlements are about 90 or 95%, which make things easier in American judicial system. We have this lack of efficiency here in Brazil, provoked by this excess of litigation. Do you think that in some way, this culture, this growing culture of precedents that our Civil Procedural Code incorporated in 2015 can help to face this problem, this lack of efficiency, by using precedents? Also, in which way do you think that alternative dispute resolutions like mediation, negotiation can help to find this problem we have in Brazil?
Well, as you stated earlier in Portuguese, I am part of the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution, which does turn to these alternative forms like negotiation and mediation. And although I'm by no means a professional mediator, I hope to someday do that in the world of international relations. But right now I'm taking classes, and one of the classes that I took this past semester was mediation. And mediation, come to find out, is extremely, extremely helpful in settling cases before they have to go to court, so people don't have to turn to litigation or arbitration, which, from what I understand, Brazil is very backed up in court cases. And because there are so many people that turn to litigation, there's too many cases for judges to solve, and there's kind of a problem there. And I think that we see that even in the States some, and that's why there's kind of a growing trend of mediation. Mediation is unique because it allows parties to come around a table and to see ways that they might not have thought about before, or that in a courtroom would never get settled in the same way, and to see, oh, well, you want to use this part of what we're fighting for, but you really need this. I really want an apology, but you just want to make sure that your son can still go to college, and see, oh, okay, these are the different issues at stake. These are the different interests, and really play to an interest-based type negotiation. And a mediator is there not to solve the problem. They're not there to find truth, but they're to make sure the process is fair and neutral and allow the parties to work out and to speak. I think of divorced couples. A mediation is, in a way, a form of therapy, right? Where couples are sitting there arguing, but they are allowed to work out, okay, well, she really wants to keep the house, but he wants to keep his dad's old Mustang, and work that out. And I think mediation, yes, is great between two individuals, but like we were talking about earlier, mediation also, I think, could promote, if we brought it to this level, allow for countries and nations to do mediation on a national and even international level. I think back to the World Trade Organization. The Doha round has been going on since 2001. That's almost 20 years because negotiations between developing and developed countries have fallen through. But if we brought mediation to the table, maybe that as an alternative form of dispute resolution could actually promote healthier relationships in the long run, and also figure out results then and there instead of dragging it out for many decades. And so I think looking at Brazil's system through this lens of dispute resolution, 80% of cases that are mediated go through. 80% of mediations do not fail. They work. They reach settlement. And wow, 80%, and yet we have very few mediations per year. But that's awesome. Why are we not using that and utilizing mediation more than we do? Obviously, there are several factors that play into why it's not as broad yet. But I think if we turn to these forms, we can use them as a stepping stone in the process of reform.
Okay. Jessie B, I'm very happy with this time with you. Thank you very much for the contributions you gave to our Court of Justice. I would like to speak on the behalf of Justice Paulo Velting, who is enthusiastic of this dialogue, of this international dialogue, so that we can promote and improve this debate between civil law system and common law system, especially now that we are dealing with precedents in a different way in Brazil. So thank you very much for this time together. Be welcome to be back again. And I hope you enjoy our city and also have a good time here with us. See you.
Thank you very much for having me.